Hello everyone and welcome back to FreezeME. This time we're heading to that new world we unlocked midway through the last video. This game isn't the longest game, it only has 3 worlds, but don't mistake it for being that short either. It definitely has some decent surprises in store for us later, so you should look forward to that. In spite of this place being called Chilly Cool Frozen Mountain, we're not going to be seeing that much ice or snow. That doesn't mean we won't see any, but it's not as prevalent as the name would have you believe. We want to head behind the start to get to the first golden cube. You might be confused about this at first, but that's what the signs are for. We also activated our first checkpoint because we're going to have to be coming back this way a couple of times. And now it's time to head up the concrete structure, but first there are some minor platforming obstacles in our way. We can freeze them, but they stay frozen for a very brief period, so we need to move immediately after we do so. Also, sometimes the platforming obstacles hit the camera, which means we kinda had to make that jump blind. Thankfully, I think that's the only time the platforming obstacles smack into the camera. This sign is just to distract us. I guess it worked. Not for very long, but maybe that's all the time Fat the Cat needed to put together his master plan. So we have to do some curved jumps here. Those aren't all that frequent in the game, and that's because the controls are a little touchy. Most of the time the platforming is going to be really straightforward like this. I mean, this is almost two-dimensional if it weren't for the fact that we could adjust the camera. And hey look, it's more wall jumping. Some of these crates inexplicably are bouncy and some are not. But it's a good bet to just assume they're bouncy, because usually they are. Just like the bouncy platforms in the first world, these bouncy crates don't bounce us very high, but they do bounce us high enough to throw us off if we're not ready for it. It is time for one of the more interesting uses of our freezing powers. I mean, yeah, we're gonna freeze another platform, but this time the platforms are special. I think it's a bit odd that this wasn't the first mission since it's the one directly in front of the starting area, but maybe they wanted some traditional platforming first. So these blocks have 2 faces. They have a white piggy face and a black piggy face. And in order to make the next platform appear, we need to step on the right side. So for example, for this set, we wouldn't step on the white piggy faces, so if I try to step on the black piggy faces, like this, then the next platform will not appear. But if I instead step on the white piggy faces as I'm about to demonstrate, then the next block will appear. So you just need to figure out which color face you need to step on to continue the platforms, like this. Some of the jumps can actually be kinda difficult. It's important to remember that your double jump goes way further than it seems to. Now, because the big piggy block has a black face on it, we need to step on the black faces this time. That's how you know what the next set is going to be. So since this big piggy block has a white face, now we need to step on the white faces. I'm sure you got it figured out. This mission is also a good way to get used to the touchy controls. Because these are very small platforms, let's be real here. Also, we can totally skip the last big piggy platform and just jump straight up. But we're not going to. you remember that direction we first went in with the concrete structure? Well, we need to go back there, and this time we're going to use the teleporter. The teleporter will actually put us right where we need to be for this next golden cube. Right in front of the Crystal Labyrinth. And in spite of its rather intimidating name, it's not all that bad. You mostly just have to double jump over everything, and stick to the wall to avoid the gas. The perspective is most of the challenge, really, and I think that's intentional, but we still have more than enough hearts to tank most of the damage. In this last room there's a wooden barrier, and we can blow it up using this exploding enemy. You know, just like we did with those stone blocks in the last world. This time we're headed in front of us again, but a lot further in front of us, and you might have noticed that in spite of this being chilly, cool, frozen mountain, it has more to do with ghosts than, well, being chilly, cool, frozen. Even the music easily reflects the haunting atmosphere. The music doesn't feel very cold at all. These falling platforms, by the way, they jiggle you when you step on them. I mean, I guess that's to be expected, but it can really screw with your jumps. We're going to activate this checkpoint so we can hop back here anytime we need to. And the reason we'd want to hop back here is because there's a catapult, but we'll get to that later. These terrifying tater-tot demon monsters are going to be our platforms for the level. We have to freeze them to jump on them, otherwise we'll get hurt. Unfortunately, I missed and ended up wall jumping. As I said, the controls can be a bit touchy, but when you get used to them, it's not so bad. What is a little surprising, though, is how bouncy these guys are when you land on them. A couple of important things to note. You can bounce anywhere on these guys after they're frozen, and you can double jump anytime while you're in the air, pretty much. That second thing in particular makes this a lot easier. You'll notice that every time we land on a platform with green spirits on it, that's when the demonic tater-tots appear. It's just a neat little visual touch, so that way you know the game has consistent logic. I really like when games, okay, we missed, but that's not so bad. Let's just start over. Welcome to a mission that I'm a tiny bit disappointed in. Not that it's not fun or anything, I just feel like it was, its gimmick was underutilized. Still has some nice platforming and it's really cute, so you can always say that about it. I feel that you could call most things in this game cute, from the game design to the music to the general aesthetic, to the atmosphere. Everything in this game is kinda cute, intentional or otherwise. You may notice there are some monsters floating around in UFOs, and don't worry about that, we'll get to that later. We do have to pass by a lot of interesting looking stuff on the way to our objective though, like this pond with a giant fish in it. We'll discover what that fish is doing too, but not until much later. We are going to take a brief dip in the water though, so we can grab ourselves a screw. Of course you know what these are for by now. This one took me a very long time to find when I first played this game. I was a little bit upset. I was wandering around the entire world shouting, "Will someone please give me a screw?" We are now at the windmill, and the windmill's whole thing is that it produces way too much wind for us to be able to platform properly. In order to turn off the windmill, we just need to kill the monster that's operating it, which should be easy peasy. And that's what I'm disappointed with. Originally, I thought I was going to have to freeze the windmill's blades and start platforming before the freezing wore off, but the freezing wears off immediately. So it turned out that I just had to shut it off from the inside, which, honestly, yeah, that was a little disappointing. This platforming is pretty basic until we get to the part with the spikes with the moving platform. And normally we would have to jump over the spikes and dodge them, but we can just, hop right onto the gravity cube. Because the gravity cube sucks us in from quite a distance. After pressing this button, a wooden block appears, and it will disappear when the timer stops ticking. And lastly, the hardest part of the mission, these crumbling platforms. As I said, they jiggle when you step on them, which can really screw with your jump arc, and that would be bad, this close to the golden cube. With this mission, our goal is to race again Piggleton on ice, and in spite of it being worded rather strangely, I think you understand what the idea is. In order to race Piggleton, we actually need to get on the ice down here. And fortunately, we can kick in the air to negate any fall damage. So as you might have figured, the ice has special properties, and those special properties mean that we don't ever have to stop sliding. And as long as we're sliding, we are way faster than Piggleton. The difficulty, of course, comes from the fact that it's difficult to steer while sliding, and there are a lot of obstacles. But the obstacles are slow enough that they're not that big a threat, and even if you do get hit by one of them, you can just jump back into sliding immediately after. We have plenty of hearts to take the damage. Hey, I'm sure you remember this catapult from earlier. Well, this time we're actually going to use it, and we're going to take the teleporter there. It's a good thing I remembered we have the teleporter, because in my original playthrough I just walked everywhere. We of course have 2 screws at our disposal, one of them which we just got recently, so we can fix the catapult. And this is the only catapult in the level, which is appropriate because it can shoot us anywhere in the level. What we really want to do, though, is shoot to that ghost castle way up in the sky. Now, I'm going to completely level with you. I have no idea what we're supposed to do when we get up here to the ghost castle, because I kinda broke it. I assumed that I meant to do something with these floating platforms and altars that are lying around on top of the cloud. But instead, I just abused the slide jump to get all the way up the hill and grab the golden cube without bothering with any of that. This exploit took much less time on my original run, but it's still an exploit and I thought it was worth showing because that's kinda something I do. As for this ghost castle itself, it's, well, intangible. We can just walk right through it. Not that it would have provided much of an obstacle, but still. Look, damn it, there is an exploit here, and as soon as I figure out which side of the hill I jumped on to get up there the first time, we will exploit this. It will happen. I adamantly refuse to do things the proper way when the proper way would take slightly more effort. I'm sure any day now when the FreezeME speedruns start rolling in, people will thank me for this. I will be looked upon as a prodigy or a great pioneer. I am able to bend the space in FreezeME to my will. I command it like a puppet, and it will stop fighting me back any second now, and recognize its true master. Any fucking second. There we go, I did it, finally. So do you guys remember that mission in the last world where we had to collect 20 coins while a timer ticked down? Well, it's time to do that again, only this time it's actually challenging. This is due in no small part to the UFO monsters roaming around which drop bombs all over the place, specifically in the path of the coins we need to collect. And we're gonna run into those a lot, not to mention the gas plumes that appear out of the ground. It doesn't help that the gas plumes only activate when we're standing right next to them, but I think this is due to some limitations in the programming and not an intentional feature. Because this happens with everything. Coins only spin when you get near them, enemies only move when you get near them. It's a little bit odd to say the least. To turn on the clock we need to press this button, but the clock is inside this room. If you didn't know that, then you wouldn't be able to freeze it and you would have a hell of a time getting all the coins. By which I mean it might be impossible. But now that we've frozen the clock, it shouldn't be all that bad. We're gonna take a bit of damage because, I mean, look at this absolute gauntlet of fuckery we have to make our way through. And I really enjoy this challenge because, it's the first sign of real difficulty in the game, and the last coin, we need to jump really precisely to grab it. It helps to remember that we gain a lot of momentum during our double jump. So yeah, I actually really like this one. I don't have any complaints about it. I did point out a weird little flaw in the programming, but it doesn't affect the game too strongly. It just reinforces this game is not incredibly polished. Alright everyone, welcome to the final mission of this video where we will face off against the second boss, Pontus. Now what we're supposed to do, as the intro to the mission showed us, is use the gravity coil wrapped around the castle and climb all the way through there, through all those hazards, all that dangerous shenaniganry, and finally make our way up to the castle gates. But instead we're going to use the catapult. Now it does need to be aimed in just the right spot, but we should be able to hit the side of one of the towers. And just like that, we're on top of the castle, and with a simple drop down, we'll be at the castle gates. Much easier than going through all of those hazards, isn't it? Pontus is a special boss fight. He cannot be frozen because of his armor. So how do we hurt him? Well, we wait for him to raise his sword and then kick him. Yeah, that's seriously all we have to do. Oh no, his armor has fallen off, so now what do? Well, this time we freeze him and then kick him.